An influential voice on foreign affairs speaks out about the crisis in Venezuela. An interview with OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro. I'm Elaine Reyes in Washington, D.C., and this is America's Now.
Venezuela is a nation on the brink. An extreme scarcity of groceries, goods, and medicines has caused unrest and death. With a carton of eggs costing $150 US, companies are closing due to the rising cost of supplies. Now the country could face suspension from the OAS. America's Now talks to the leader of that organization, Secretary General Luis Almagro.
Here we are dealing with commitments that countries have according to the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and you have to fulfill those commitments.
What was your reaction when you heard OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro proposed a meeting to discuss this from the OAS?
Well, I was surprised, but at the same time, I found that Almagro was taking a kind of hysterical behavior.
We'll also give you the latest from Venezuela.
Welcome to the show. The South American country of Venezuela has reached a crisis point and become one of the most perilous places to live. Severe shortages of food, medicine, and electricity have taken their toll on this nation of 30 million, placing them in dangerous and often life-threatening situations on a daily basis. The economic breakdown is largely the result of the falling price of oil, Venezuela's main export. It's led to a devalued currency, widespread hunger, soaring crime, and one of the highest murder rates on earth. Arvin Gibbs is in Venezuela. He has more on this country in chaos.
Yes, Elaine, very difficult times for Venezuelans, and the older generation here describing it as something they've never really experienced in their entire lives. Of all the problems you list there, probably the most serious are the shortages, which seem to be getting worse, not better. And there is an additional twist, really, and that is that alongside the shortages, there are increased incidences of looting in some out of desperation, but also criminal elements, of course, taking advantage of the general chaos and making everything even worse. And then, and these things are connected, there is the ongoing political crisis with a showdown really between the presidency and the National Assembly. You may recall that the National Assembly became under opposition control following a landslide election in December. But since then, President Maduro has pretty much ignored it and used a largely tame Supreme Court to impose his will. And that is what has brought him into conflict with the OAS, and most specifically the Secretary General of the OAS, Luis Almagro. The two have been exchanging insults, with Almagro describing Maduro as on the path towards becoming a petty dictator, and in turn Maduro has said that Almagro is nothing more than a lackey of the United States. Against that background, the Secretary General is encouraging OAS members to invoke the organization's democratic charter against Venezuela, basically saying that if you have a president that's ignoring an elected parliament, does that country remain democratic? Now, one question I suppose people will ask is, does Venezuela care about its international reputation? I would argue that it does. Domestically, it does try to flaunt its international relations as a source of legitimacy of the government. Now, under Hugo Chavez, it did have another brush with the OAS when there was a US-driven initiative within the organization to monitor the democratic state of its members, a move which failed and was then hailed by Chavez as a sign of support for Venezuela within Latin America. Aside from the OAS, Venezuela is a member of several other regional groupings, including UNASUR, a regional grouping to a certain extent modelled on the European Union, and ALBA, an alliance of the region's leftist countries, together with others. It has, since the Hugo Chavez days, wielded substantial influence through offering subsidised oil to the region, though that has a lot less clout now the oil price globally has slumped. So to summarise, really, alongside the domestic problems facing Venezuela, it's also having to reassess its role internationally. A little bit of focus, of course, on that due to the shifts politically in this specific region, with a change in the government in Argentina and also a shift in Brazil, albeit perhaps a temporary one. But those that want to portray Venezuela right now as the odd one out rather than any sort of regional leader do have a little bit more substance to their argument. Elaine.
Correspondent Stephen Gibbs, thank you for that overview. International leaders have been cautious to speak out about Venezuela's economic and political turmoil. Many are encouraging a dialogue within the country over. Recently, the leader of one of the oldest international organizations to promote peace and protect rights in the Americas has taken a public stand on Venezuela. He is Luis Almagro, the Secretary General of the Organization of American States. He describes the conditions in Venezuela as grave. He cites humans and has called for an emergency meeting among the organization's member states. I had the chance to interview Luis Almagro here in Washington, where we spoke more about Venezuela. Let's take a listen to what he had to say. Secretary General, thank you so much for joining us here on Americans Now.
A pleasure.
What made you determine that intervention was needed in Venezuela, and why do you think that the OAS needs to get involved?
I don't think we need intervention. Intervention is not the concept that we are, with what we are dealing with Asia. I think the main point here is that every country in the continent has a commitment related to the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and that you have to fulfill what is established in the Articles 3 and 4. Therefore, we need, when these responsibilities are not fully committed by some countries, to request that solutions should be provided by this country, or the system should act in order to make these commitments that the countries have according to the Charter possible.
Some people would take issue with that. Other countries believe that you are trying to intervene in Venezuela. But what would you say is happening that is having you call this meeting? What are you concerned about?
It is not about intervention. Very clear, that's not the case. Here we are dealing with commitments that countries have according to the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and you have to fulfill those commitments. Articles 3 and 4, they establish the basic principles for democracy and the necessary elements for the practice of democracy. When we deal with that, of course, countries, they have a responsibility about that. And in the case of Venezuela, definitely we have found certain problems that they are, the way the institutions are working, that some action is needed by the organization, and that is what we have requested.
What kind of actions?
This action is, first of all, if you read Article 20 of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, it's mainly about mediation, dialogue, the diplomatic work, and about that it can add some diplomatic mission in order to deal with the case. It's a gradual and progressive process, and this gradual and progressive process, of course, have to deal with an approximation, an approach to this problem in order to be fixed by the Venezuelans. That's the main issue, the main task here.
Some of your member states have been pretty quiet about their feelings of what should be done. Cuba says as long as this is happening, it will not rejoin the OAS. Do you think you have support, enough support, 2/3 support of the other member states for something to happen?
If you see the Article 20, you can, it is very clear that a simple majority is needed in order to assess the situation and in order to provide the diplomatic assistance of the organization related to this matter. We respect any national position about this, and we put into consideration of the countries this proposal to invoke the Article 20 of the Charter, and that is how the work goes on. Dealing with the countries, coordinating with the countries, and the countries finding the decision that is better for the case.
Some of the countries in the OAS are calling for more dialogue. Do you think that is enough? Can Venezuela solve its own problems?
And about dialogue, we have said in our report, if you take chapter 12 of the conclusions, you can find that we have asked for dialogue. In fact, we have said the problems created by a lack of dialogue must be resolved, or more dialogue must be created. There is no worse sign of malfunctioning political system than when there are no fundamental premises for dialogue between political parties, the government, the opposition and social actors. When the equation 50% plus one vote equals 100%, and when 50% less one vote equals 0. And we have added a quote of Jose Antonio Marina saying, "Rabies don't spread from a dead dog. Doesn't even apply to dogs. What is important is the rabies bacillus disappears. A problem is only solved when you say values for coexistence. Otherwise, it will grow back." So we have insisted in dialogue, but this dialogue has to be very strong basis. It's not dialogue is very difficult, very different than to sit and talk. What we are talking here, what we need to fix here, is real solutions for what Venezuela has.
Do you think everyone can come together and find solutions? Is that what you were hoping for?
Yes, we have you see 8 recommendations, very specific solutions for very specific problems, institutional problems that Venezuela has today.
What are some of the solutions?
Some, we can identify some of them. First of all, it is very necessary that recall referendum should be called this year, because that will provide to the citizens of Venezuela their own decision about their own future. Second, we need to establish a balance between the different branches of government in Venezuela, something completely different than what is going on, that every action of the legislative power is completely blocked. Third, we need a different integration of the judiciary power that can bring solutions, the real solutions, in order to bring justice to the Venezuelan people. We need a different integration of the Cruz Commission that should have international technical support in order to achieve the result that the Commission wants to achieve. We need to open international channels to assist Venezuela in the humanitarian crisis that is facing, and that is a very important and relevant point, and where we should work all together, because this, what we are talking here, is about people that is eaten 1.5 times per day, or people that is not getting their antibiotics when they have an infection, people that they are dying because of chronic diseases because it is impossible to find the treatment. And this is a humanitarian side that we have to take care and fix the solutions.
You mentioned a recall referendum,
yes.
But a lot of Venezuelans will argue that President Maduro is a legitimate, democratically elected
yes.
head of state.
Yes, it's what we argue too. I mean, President Maduro was elected, and we need to respect his mandate. Plus, he needs to respect the Constitution. The Constitution opens the possibility for the society, for the people of Venezuela, to have a referendum to recall his term if they don't feel happy with that. They are collecting signatures for that. So if this process goes according to the Constitution, if not more obstacles are created, then we let the people decide. And this is, the decision of the people is very needed for polarization of the political system that we have in Venezuela.
You and President Nicolas Maduro had some very fiery exchanges in social media, online, in the media. His government has called you a puppet and said that you are working with the opposition and the United States. What is your reaction to that?
You know, I need to defend my impartiality. And that's why I just made one answer to President Maduro, and I think was good enough. To make clear my impartiality, I am not a CIA agent as he claimed, that he needs to respect his people and provide the necessary for this recall referendum to be in term during this year. He needs also to provide justice for all his citizens. So what we ask are basic political principles that sometimes are very necessary to make him remember about Venezuela. But it was very constructive, and our approach was to be able to build, of course.
Criticism that the OAS doesn't have a lot of influence anymore with all the other regional blocs that are out there and they're competing. You became Secretary General a year ago. What are you hoping to accomplish? Are you trying to make the OAS more relevant?
You see that today there can be discussion about practically everything else, but nobody is saying anymore that the OAS is irrelevant. In fact, what they are complaining today is that the OAS is too relevant, too much relevant. So what we have now is a completely different situation than what we were talking 1.5 years ago. The thing is, today, what we want to accomplish, you know, the OAS is the best organization that exists in the world. It's the one that has the best juridical instruments in order to defend democracy and protect human rights. Plus, it has the mechanism to make that possible. So it's just every day, wake up and work about that. And that is what I want to accomplish.
Secretary General Luis Almagro, thank you so much for joining us here on America's Now.
A great pleasure.
Nicolas Maduro became Venezuela's president in 2013 following the death of Hugo Chavez and was his hand-picked successor. Maduro's presidential term runs through 2019.
Coming up.
We also sit down with Venezuela's ambassador to the OAS, Bernardo Alvarez.
For us, the OAS plays a role because it's a way of connecting and participating with countries like Canada and the US in the same table.
America's Now.
Welcome back. We also had the opportunity to sit down with Bernardo Alvarez, permanent representative of Venezuela to the OAS. Venezuela's president and government have angrily responded to what they consider interventionism from Almagro. Let's take a listen. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us here on America's Now.
Yes.
What was your reaction when you heard OAS Secretary General Luis Almagro proposed a meeting to discuss suspending your country from the OAS? Is this unprecedented? Because there have been some inflammatory exchanges between Almagro and President Maduro.
Well, I was surprised. I found that Almagro was taking a kind of hysterical behavior, because since he was appointed, he hasn't stopped of trying to intervene in Venezuelan domestic affairs. And he has abused of his role as a general secretary. He's acting on his own with no authorization from the member states. So I was surprised, but at the same time, we knew that it was going to be something like that when he started trying to intervene in Venezuelan political domestic affairs.
Some of the member states are calling for dialogue instead. Some of them don't agree with what he's saying. Is it too late for dialogue? And what are you hearing from some of your counterparts in the region?
It's never late to talk, to dialogue. If not, look at the US. I mean, they have started dialogues with Cuba, with Iran, with so many other countries where long histories of disputes and misunderstandings in countries. And the dialogue has been promoted by the Venezuelan government. President Maduro is the one not this time that we have an effort of dialogue sponsored by UNASUR and under the coordination of 3 former presidents of Latin America. But in the past, this is not the first time that we have the initiative of promoting dialogue. And this is part of the problem, because it doesn't make sense that on the one hand you are promoting dialogue, and the OAS, the Permanent Council, which is the political body of the OAS, is supporting the dialogue in Venezuela. At the same time, the Secretary General of the organization is asking for a completely different position regarding Venezuela, going back to this idea of hostility against the country. So there is a clear contradiction of what the Permanent Council has said, and in the declaration they did the 1st of June, offering the help of the OAS, but supporting the dialogue. And at the same time, Mr. Almagro, who has already taken a political position regarding Venezuela since many months ago, and that he's asking for a kind of suspension of confrontation with Venezuela. And the other important thing is that one thing are the member states, and another thing is Mr. Almagro. Mr. Almagro, sometimes he thinks that he would try to present himself as he was another state. He's not. He was elected by the states to coordinate actions. He's not the president of the OAS, and he has to act under specific instructions of the Permanent Council, and he hasn't done that.
He has called or supports a recall referendum. And going back to dialogue, we've heard these reports that members of the government have already been meeting with members of the opposition in the Dominican Republic. I want to get your thoughts on that, and if you've heard anything come out of that.
Yeah, well, first, the recall referendum is possible in Venezuela because it was President Chavez that incorporated that in the Constitution. The political parties and the members of the opposition that are right now trying to use the recall referendum, they did not support the Constitution at the beginning that incorporate that figure. So we are the ones that support a recall referendum because we put it in the Constitution. So this is very important. And the recall referendum is in the Constitution. And so he doesn't have to support it because it's already there. So he tried to confuse the public opinion regarding that. And of course, there is dialogue. As I said, this is a dialogue that has been promoted by the President Maduro with UNASUR and 3 former presidents, and that was supported by the Permanent Council of the OAS in the declaration of June the 1st. So this is what we have now. We have to give dialogue time to unfold. So it doesn't make too much sense that on the one hand you are promoting dialogue, and on the other hand this guy Almagro is insisting in a meeting of the Permanent Council to discuss his own opinion regarding Venezuela. He did a report with no mandate. No one asked him to do it. And in the OAS, if you write a report, it's because you have been instructed to do it by one of the bodies of the organization, being the General Assembly or the Permanent Council. At the same time, he's embracing the political position of the opposition. The ideas of the opposition. The Venezuelan government was not consulted about this report. So it's a very biased report, and it doesn't reflect the situation of Venezuela. So we, as Venezuela, will reject that report because it's illegal, it's politically biased, and it does not help to the process of dialogue that we are now going on in Venezuela.
Late President Hugo Chavez had called the OAS worthless. With Mercosur, UNASUR, CELAC, and other regional blocs, where do you think the OAS fits? And do you think Venezuela will leave the OAS on its own?
We think that, there is a new wave of integration in Latin America. We have new organizations like ALBA, UNASUR, CELAC. There are all organizations like the OAS, for example, there are new relationships among integration mechanism. Like, for example, there is a lot relationship between ALBA and CARICOM. We also have Petrocaribe, that is another initiative. So I think what we have is that it reflects the complexity of the hemisphere. For us, the OIS plays a role because it's a way of connecting and participating with countries like Canada and the US in the same table. So OIS should be the organization that allows Latin American countries to sit down and Caribbean countries to sit down with US and Canada. And I think this is important. This is important.
Ambassador, what do you think will happen when the OAS meets to discuss Venezuela?
I think more and more countries understand that Mr. Almagro has been abusing of his role of Secretary General. Also, there is more and more people know that he has lost the diplomatic role that a man have, that he is a biased person, that he has a political stand regarding Venezuela, and he represent, you know, he's taking the agenda of some political actors and players in Venezuela, and for that my feeling is that more and more people are convinced that he has lost the legitimacy to talk about Venezuela. It's going to harm the US, the OAS. The OAS is an institution that has lost a lot of credibility over the years, and I think unfortunately Almagro is not helping at all the OAS to gain or regain its credibility.
Ambassador Bernardo Alvarez, thank you so much for joining us on America's Now.
It's a pleasure.
Representative Alvarez was once Venezuela's ambassador to the United States and the country's vice minister in relations.
Coming up.
A place in Costa Rica where a high number of people live to be 100.
They have sort of a positive outlook on life, and they value a lot their social life, their relationship with their families and with the community.
America's Now.
Welcome back to America's Now. The number of people who live to be 100 years old or more is growing. This segment of the population is the fastest growing, with more than 450,000 of them living across the world. Experts say there are many factors that contribute to their longevity, and they've recently started identifying key traits common to them all. Those traits have also been found in 5 distinct areas around the globe, and 2 of them are in the Americas. Correspondent Harris Whitbeck visited one of these so-called blue zones, a picturesque peninsula in
Panchita Castillo, Rey Neri Fonseca, José Guevara, Andrés López. They are some of the dozens of people who are more than 100 years old living on the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica. It is an idyllic finger of land located off of the country's Pacific coast. The weather is good, air is fresh, life is simple. People seem like they want to live forever. But there is much more to the secret of longevity on the peninsula. Researchers say Nicoya is one of 5 zones around the world that house an unusually high number of centenarians. Ikaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, California. Years of studies have identified 4 separate traits that scientists say are shared by the centenarians living in all of those zones around the world. Proximity to family and friends, diet, a certain level of physical activity, and a spiritual life. At 109, Panchita is the oldest living person in Costa Rica. She is a great-great-great-great-grandmother. She was born in Nicoya in 1906. She still receives daily visits from 93-year-old Pablo, her youngest son.
Mamá, ¿amaneció bien?
Bien, papá, ¿y usted?
Bien, también. A ver, vamos a pasear a algún lado.
¿Ah? ¿Por qué?
A pasear a algún lado.
She is hard of hearing and blind, but otherwise in good health. She enjoys visitors and talking about the past.
Cuando usted nació no habían aviones.
No, mi mamá ella lo había visto en la Biblia. Ella los decía, en tal tiempo van a andar los hombres por el aire y por todas partes se van a meter. Y no es mentira, mire.
Y aquí siempre han vivido del campo.
Aquí en el campo, yo vivo en el campo. Comíamos carne en monte bastante. Por eso digo yo que todos los animales no eran inyectados. Y ahora, ¿qué es lo que no se ha inyectado ahora?
¿Y usted se siente bien de salud?
Sí, antes. ¿Dónde estaba en la misa?
¿Y ahora puede ir a misa o no?
No, si me llevan voy.
Sí.
Pero como no tienen carro aquí. Muchos me preguntan, ¿por qué ha vivido usted esto? Solo Dios sabe. Solo Él. Solo Él sabe por qué me tiene a mí aquí.
Sí.
Solo Él. Todos mis hermanos se fueron. Y mi hermana, mujer, también se fue. Solo yo, no le digo que solo yo estoy.
¿Cuál?
Nieto. ¡Oh! Ni para qué, papá. Nietos y bisnietos, yo todo tengo.
¿Qué hace todos los días?
Estar sentada.
¿Está sentada?
Sentada y acostada, si no puedo hacer nada. No puedo hacer nada. Solo sirvo para comer. Vamos a dar una vuelta afuera, ¿no?
Up until a couple of years ago, Panchita would still chop wood and tend to her garden. She now spends her days with her family sitting on their front porch. Diet. It is one of the factors scientists look at the most when investigating Costa Rica's centenarians.
¿Cómo no? Esta es una de las comidas base de nosotros, es el arroz y los frijoles. Y sí, efectivamente tiene muchos carbohidratos y el campesino, que es el que más lo consume, necesita hidratarse porque el trabajo es muy duro, muy pesado.
The traditional breakfast is simple: eggs, black beans, and rice. Tortillas are a staple for all meals in the Costa Rican diet. Traditional methods for making them involve the use of lime to soften corn husks. The lime contributes calcium that can strengthen bones that weaken in old age. Researchers say combining nutrients found in natural foods is key to longevity.
Allá en Nicoya nos decían que la tortilla de maíz, bueno, obviamente es un elemento básico de la dieta costarricense, pero que en esa zona tiene mucho que ver con el hecho de que hay tanta longevidad en la zona, que el maíz nixtamalizado contribuye a que la gente viva más. O sea, ¿cómo lo ves tú como nutricionista?
Tiene que ver un poco el procesamiento, porque la nixtamalización, es decir, eliminarle el ollejo al maíz en la cocción, incorporaba necesariamente, para que produjera una reacción química, incorporaba ceniza o cal, y eso era incorporarle minerales al maíz que quedaban a través de todo el proceso, y de hecho estaba comprobado que la tortilla hecha de esa manera era la principal fuente de calcio de las poblaciones precolombinas, mucho antes de que llegara el ganado con los españoles, ¿verdad? Entonces eso incorpora calcio a la dieta podría estar contribuyendo, pero hay más elementos que eso.
Orgánico, orgánico, agua potable, productos amigables con la naturaleza.
But nutritionists say access to that type of healthy diet, that includes natural herbs and fresh produce, is nowadays not that easy. Today's centenarians grew up in times when healthful food was more common.
Cada vez es más difícil tener las condiciones naturales para tener estos alimentos. Muchas de estas hierbas empezaron a ser consideradas por la agricultura contemporánea como alimentos, como mala hierbas. En el contexto del monocultivo, cualquier cosa que aparezca es mala hierba. Y muchas de estas plantas precisamente crecen en contextos de agricultura de policultivo.
Nutrition is but one factor involved in keeping people healthy as they age.
Probablemente haya más de un secreto que el que vemos, pero que efectivamente la alimentación ha contribuido. Es lo que llamamos el ambiente, ¿verdad? No solo la genética, sino lo ambiental. Probablemente hayan genes ahí que prolonguen la existencia, pero un ambiente que lo favorece. Poca contaminación, poca exposición a agroquímicos, a alimentos chatarra, además gente que trabaja, la actividad física es permanente. Es decir, todos esos elementos del ambiente están dados también ahí. Y la alimentación es uno de esos externos que nos da vida. Entonces por eso destaca más que otros. No, es que hoy en día pensamos en actividad física, hacer ejercicio, salir a correr. Y hasta ahora es que estamos cambiando a que la actividad física puede ser, no necesariamente es eso, puede ser trabajar la huerta, alimentar a los animales, caminar hasta la finca.
Estar conectado con la vida, ¿no?
Sí,
de cierta manera.
Cumpleaños feliz, te deseamos a ti. Cumpleaños abuelo, cumpleaños feliz.
¡Sople, sople!
Jose Guevara just celebrated his 106th birthday. He says he still feels relevant. His family life is his support system. Reineri Fonseca is 101 years old. She and her husband have lived in the same house for more than 50 years. He is bedridden, but she still keeps house, cooks their meals,
Lo tapa y lo deja ahí tapadito.
makes time for coffee and biscuits for visitors.
Ya le echó azúcar.
Ya le eché, gracias. Café Rey se llama.
O sea, café rey. Sí. ¿Cómo? Están muy ricas las galletas.
Están muy ricas, el café estaba más rico.
¿Les gustó?
Ay, sí, a mí me gusta mucho el café.
Demographers have been studying the centenarians of Nicoya for years.
They have a sort of similar outlook on life and on longevity as well.
Mm-hmm. What is that outlook? How would you define it?
Well, from the interviews, one thing that came out is that they have sort of a positive outlook on life and they value a lot their social life, their relationship with their families and with the community.
Yeah, and that's been measured. That's not just a theory.
No, it's actually been measured with interviews. I mean, with interviews that are actually comparable to other studies that have been carried out in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Good eating, a good outlook.
Apparently, yes. Apparently, the diet, I mean, is a good diet. We've done some work on the nutrition in terms of what the data the survey collected, but apparently, I mean, the work that has been done shows that apparently diet has to do with longevity as well. I mean, it's a healthy diet.
But they are not looking for the secret of old age. They're working to make sure Costa Rica can continue to afford to care for them.
We are concerned by the fact that this population keeps increasing. For example, right now, the population that's increasing the most in Costa Rica and in several other countries is the population 65 and older. So we want to know is first, know how this process of aging occurs. One of the things we want to document is exactly what type of help, other types of social services or other needs people have, because this is a population that it's increasing, and it's increasing at a very fast rate.
The government provides free health care and pensions.
Buenas tardes. Con permiso. Doña Francisca se encuentra. De Leváis la venimos a ver. ¿Cómo se ha sentido?
Las políticas en general de la institución son parejas para todo el país, pero digamos si las unidades de este lado en la península pues nos enfocamos hacia promoción de la salud y estilos de vida saludables y darles mejor calidad de vida a los adultos mayores, porque es una población que nos demanda servicios, que consulta, entonces sí tenemos que adecuar a diferencia del resto del país. Entonces sí en la península sí hay un poquito más de enfoque, pero es por la necesidad y por el servicio que tenemos que brindar. Entonces sí hay más enfoque en este lado, pero es circunstancial porque las políticas son iguales en toda la institución, en todo el país. Guanacaste es uno de los cantones o provincias con un índice de pobreza diferente o más bajo que el resto del país, y los adultos mayores en su mayoría son de escasos recursos, ¿sí? La gran cantidad de adultos mayores están cubiertos por algún régimen de pensión.
Costa Rica treasures its centenarians. They have sparked interest from all over the world. Examples of what they say a good, simple lifestyle can achieve. And with the largest population of people over the age of 80, the Nicoya Peninsula stands to continue producing centenarians for a long time to come.
The centenarians of Nicoya are considered living national treasures and are especially valuable to researchers interested in ensuring quality of life for the elderly.
Coming up.
An Afro-Caribbean sound that's positively electric.
We have a broad musical spectrum: American music, Caribbean music, salsa, cumbia, and other electronic genres.
America's Now.
Welcome back. Straight from the heart of Caracas, we introduce you to a music group who wants to show the world another side of Venezuela. Their lyrics speak of everyday struggles, politics, drawing inspiration from former President Hugo Chavez. But the quartet also wants to exchange cultural experiences. They've performed in France, the US, and recently shot a music video in Iran, all to encourage a dialogue of different perspectives. This week's Urban Voice is Electro-Caribbean band Bitwaya.
Bitwaya Electro-Caribe Internacional Planetario haciendo la conexión. Tengo yuca, tengo manga, tengo y que me lo quita. Tengo miche, ronco, cuy, tengo y que me lo quita. Tengo samba, tengo prieta, tengo y que me lo quita. Se está quemando, se está quemando, se está quemando la mano de tu maquero. Se está quemando, se está quemando, se está quemando la mano de tu maquero.
With a fusion of electronic music and Afro-Venezuelan roots, Bitwaya brings to life a musical genre known as Electro-Caribe.
Tenemos como un espectro musical más amplio de músicas de todas las tendencias música americana, música del Caribe, la salsa, cumbia, otros géneros electrónicos, drum and bass, dubstep, mumbatón, reggaetón, soca, raga, dancehall y por ahí para adelante, ¿no?
With their quick beats and pleasant rhythms, their music conveys a culture.
Siempre que salimos tratamos de conectarnos con la gente, ¿no? Con el pueblo, con el barrio, para saber y aprender de la cultura de cada lugar, de la cultura de cada país. Y yo creo que eso es lo más importante, porque eso es lo que uno aprende y es lo que uno se lleva en el corazón.
Vitualla le dicen a las verduras en el oriente de Venezuela, entonces son las raíces, los tubérculos, la mandioca, la yuca, y es como haciendo una analogía del rescate de nuestras raíces conectada con la música urbana, la música electrónica.
This musical group was born as part of a cultural park called Tiuna El Fuerte. Located in Caracas, it's a community that uses art as a vehicle to shape leaders.
Formamos parte de un colectivo, de muchos colectivos, de investigación, de graffiti, de diseño, de teatro, nosotros de música. Este espacio forma parte de una red de muchos espacios que se están gestando, buscando generar poderes locales, autogobiernos, gestionar, buscar soluciones a los problemas del barrio, crear redes de distribución, producción de arte y también de la gente que produce la agricultura y tratar de generar nuevas economías, nuevas relaciones de vida. Lo aprendimos, vimos y ahí empezamos a experimentar y bueno, nacimos ahí en ese espacio.
Entonces bueno, quería mostrarle un poco y como mezclar lo que ustedes hacen con un poquito de Venezuela también, ¿no?
So I wanted to just show you a little bit about that so we could mix it with what you guys do and just, share.
Vitualla uses music as a way to communicate and share cultural experiences. Their methodology is also utilized by a group of drummers and dancers in Washington, D.C.
Today we had 2 translators with us here in D.C. and Vitualla. And when we asked questions and when we talked back and forth, we needed the translators. But when we started drumming, the music was the language, and the dancers could hear. This brother told me, I don't know djembe rhythms. Then he got on the djembe and he played it like I haven't heard it before. So what transcended today was the unity of music.
The group believes music can be a universal language.
Music speaks the same to everyone. So no matter where you're from, it's what your ears are hearing and what you're internally feeling, and therefore you move accordingly, whatever your body is telling you to do. And so it's something that's internal more than about where specifically you're from.
During their music industry, Vitualla has produced multiple songs and 3 music videos. One in their home country, Venezuela, the second in the United States,
Why would you do that to us? Vitualla.
And their latest one in the capital of Iran.
Fuimos invitados por un colectivo de amistad Venezuela-Irán y al principio no teníamos el equipo audiovisual propio con el que siempre viajamos. Tuvimos que hacer como hurungar entre los ciudadanos de Teherán para conseguir a alguien que nos pudiese acompañar para hacer un videoclip. Allí tuvo una historia muy diferente a la nuestra, con relación al baile, con relación a hacer cierto tipo de actividades en espacios religiosos. Y más sin embargo logramos entrar en ciertos espacios como las mezquitas y se ve en el video. Eso fue logrado porque nos conectamos con un compañero que trabaja en TV. El compañero era director, realizador, efectos especiales, edición, todo lo hizo una sola persona, conectado con el grupo Vitualla. Nos pusimos de acuerdo, buscamos locaciones y entre él y nosotros hicimos toda la dinámica técnica, fuimos asistentes, camarógrafos, caleteros, toda la producción la llevamos a cabo el grupo y esa persona. Fue una dicha.
With lyrics about feelings and dreams and mixed rhythms that have no language barrier, Vitualla will continue to show the world that music can connect cultures.
Vitualla is currently recording a third album. Their goal is to show the world the Venezuela they love.
America's Now.
Finally, the country of Colombia feeds much of the world's appetite for flowers. In fact, it's one of the globe's top exporters of them. The nation grows 32 different colors of roses alone. One entrepreneur is literally feeding people with Colombia's flowers by growing them for culinary creations. We leave you with some images of this blooming business. Thanks for watching. We look forward to seeing you again next week for another edition of America's Now.
Faltan otros.
Para resaltar un poquito el sabor de los clóricos.